My name is Richard Ballengee. I've been employed by Montgomery County Public Schools for about 40 years in various capacities. I came to Christiansburg High School in the summer of 1963. I was the joint coordinator for distributive education and for industrial cooperative training, which meant that I assisted children or students in obtaining part-time jobs, and then I would teach classes and subjects related to the job that they were doing. And sometimes I'd have to go back in the afternoons or in the evenings to complete the paperwork. So here's where it's interesting. My office was located in a girls' locker room underneath the auditorium. And the auditorium used to be used as the Christiansburg High School gym. And the girls' locker room was on the right side, and on the left side of the gym there was a boys' locker room. And the girls' locker room was converted to the office for the coordinator of the vocational programs, and that's how I obtained the office. It had an outside entrance, and as you come in the outside door, you were met with 8 steps that led up to the auditorium, or the old gym. And immediately to the right, as you come in the door, you'd go down 3 steps, and that was my office. And I kept a desk down there and typewriter and a few other pieces of equipment. One evening in September or October, I think it was, as I was working in the office about 7 o'clock in the evening, and it was beginning to get dark, and the old auditorium was darkened. You could still see in there, but it was still just shadows. And as I was working on my report, I heard footsteps in the auditorium floor. Now, being underneath the floor, it just amplified. It was very loud. And I heard these footsteps say clop, 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 like a lady walking across the floor. And I said, it must be one of the teachers working late. Anyway, I stepped up to the top of the steps and I called out, "Who's here?" And I got no response, and I couldn't see that well in that darkened auditorium. And I thought, well, maybe I imagined that. And I went back down, sat down, and started my report again. And here she came back the other way. Clop, 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 clop. Someone with shoes, heavy shoes, walking very fast. So I stepped up to the top of the steps again and I said, "Who's in here?" No response. And I thought, custodian must be playing tricks on me. So I went on back downstairs and started working again, and the third time it happened. Footsteps. So I went up to the top of the steps and I said, "I don't know who you are, but you're scaring me, and I'm leaving." And I went out and locked the place up. Well, I saw the custodian the next morning, and I said, "Mr. Light, you really scared me last night." He said, "Scared you? How?" He said, "I heard your footsteps come through the auditorium about 7 o'clock. And he said, "Mr. Ballengee, I don't work after 5 o'clock. It was not me." He says, "Probably the Black Sisters." And he had been there a long time, so he had gotten wind of what the Black Sisters was all about, but no one had shared that with me. And so I began to inquire and found out that there was a school there called the Montgomery Female Academy. In fact, it was on the same site where the high school was built. And I found pictures of the old school, a beautiful place. They were having a big May Day out front. It looked like a joyful place. found out that it was a private school owned by three sisters, or one named Carolyn Pollock, I believe was her last name. She had purchased the property and had invited her sisters to come and assist with the school. Now, what the school was made up of was girls who wanted to learn how to be young ladies. And they offered a curriculum, academic curriculum, as well as hands-on kinds of activities like how to set a table, how to be a hostess. I'm sure they had classes on flower arrangements and horseback riding, perhaps. But for some reason, the school began to lose girls. They invited, or Miss Caroline invited her sister, Virginia Wardlow, to come up from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where she was head mistress of a school there, and her sister, Mary. So the three came to run the school in Christiansburg. But it wasn't long that they began to have some financial problems, as I understand it. And evidently they devised a plan that they could make some money by insuring folks and then collecting insurance money. I had to piece all this together over the years with articles from newspapers and articles from a book that was printed. It was called Three Sisters in Black, and evidently they were quite notorious in the Christiansburg area while they were here. Some of the girls, as I understand it, would wake up in the middle of the night and there'd be one of these girls standing by their bed, these ladies. Or they would walk up and down the hallways all dressed in black. And as one commentary said, they would go out at night in a carriage and go to the cemetery. And there they would dance around in the moonlight. And I don't know whether that's true or not. It's just what I've read. And that they were very weird in their behavior. Now, from what I understand from recent articles, they had a similar experience in this school in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And I wish I knew more about the ladies other than Virginia Wardlow was a progressive teacher. She subscribed to the John Dewey philosophy of teaching, and that was you learn by doing. And rather than teaching by rote memory, they had the kids actually have hands-on experiences in their chosen fields, especially if they were learning something that was going to help them be socially graceful and that type of thing. They probably took the first home economics class offered in the public schools. But understand, this was back in the year 1900. And this experience I had, that I heard them, or I heard one of them walk across the floor. But I have no idea what kind of school they ran other than they were a weird bunch of people. I did read the book, and sure enough, it contained information about their taking out insurance policies. They had invited John Sneed to come and work there at the school. I guess maybe this was before they really had some financial problems. And evidently he came as a caretaker or sort of just a handyman. But for some reason, as I understand it, John was out leaning over the well out in the back of the school and fell in the well. Now he claimed that someone pushed him. But he got out of the well. Somebody helped him, I'm sure. But it wasn't long after that, John's bed caught on fire. Evidently an oil lamp had been spilt and caught on fire. Oh, well, John expired. He died in the fire. And from all I have read, they had an insurance policy on him. And they collected the insurance. And there were some misgivings about how he died, but it was ruled a suicide. But I've been told that the door was locked from the outside. Don't know how true that is. It's speculation. And here again, I'm going to tell you what I know, and what I don't know, I need to skip over it and either omit. But what I'm telling you is what I have heard and what I've seen. Well, no one seemed to be able to solve the problem of the footsteps across the floor. Now, it's never happened again. The whole time I was there, it never happened again. All right, well, let me tell you about my office again. If you go down those 3 steps just inside the side entrance to the building, there was a restroom down there. There was a shower room. We didn't use it. I always put equipment back in there, books and that sort of thing. But I did clean the restroom up and made it into a nice lounge area. And I moved a couch in there. And I told the men teachers, if you want to take a break and come down to my office, it's always open. And we'll have Cokes in the refrigerator there for you. If you want to take a smoke break, fine. Just clean up when you leave. So that was my understanding with the men teachers. And they did. They used it right extensively. But I cleaned that office up. I mean, I shined it. I put a mirror up there that, you know, you could use when you go into the hand washing station. And I put a lock on the door so that at night I could lock it without fear of somebody breaking in. I was real proud of that lock. And I'm the only one that had a key to it. So I came to work one morning, and lo and behold, I opened the door with my key. My office had been trashed. There were papers everywhere. It looked like someone had taken soap and put on their hands and just smeared the mirror and the walls around the rest area there. I'm the only one that had the key. I've never solved that problem, how that happened. I've asked everybody. I even asked my friends, teachers, did you somehow get a key made? And they didn't. They didn't. I'm the only one that had the key. But that's one of those things, and I began to, as I would come down there and work doing my job, looking around, there was several vents in the wall. I always got the idea that someone was watching me. I never saw them. It was just a feeling. Have you ever had that feeling? But the kids didn't like to quit talking about it. They made up every story in the world about the Black sisters. How a baby had been murdered in the building and blood splattered on. I mean, it was just crazy stuff that I knew good and well, not true, not true. And the teachers didn't talk too much about it other than, yeah, well, so we've got a school that's haunted. Got to understand now, that old building was built in 1936. That was the year I was born, by the way. So the building is 86 years old. The wind would blow and the windows would rattle. Sometimes the glass in the buildings would be maybe a little loose. It was an eerie sound. I'm going to tell you this story, but I don't want you to make much of it. After we became a middle school, and we were able to afford more staff, we put a night custodian in. He worked from about 3 in the evening until 10 at night. And one day, as I met him on the walkway between buildings, he said, "Mr. Ballengee, who was in your old office last night?" I said, "I don't know, Jack. Who was it? What did you see?" He said, "Well, a light came on, and then the light went off, but a lady walked out of that door." I said, "What did she look like?" He said, "I don't know. It was kind of dark, but she had on dark clothes, and she walked down behind the agriculture building." I said, "Jack, are you kidding me?" No. He didn't know anything about the Black Sister. He had never heard it. I doubt that happened. I think it was his imagination. But at the same time, it kind of added to the repertoire of information that I had. I even said to one of my teachers, one of the industrial arts teachers, "Why don't you come up here and sit with me one night, and we'll just wait and see if she shows up again." Well, what showed up over the course of a couple of weeks was some vandals that would get in the building, and sometimes they would take stuff, damage it. We lost a couple of band instruments due to vandalism. But it wasn't the Black Sisters, I knew that. So I don't know who the lady was, whether it was, none of my teachers admitted that they had been downstairs. Now, before I became assistant principal, and I still had that office, the day custodian would say to me, "Mr. Ballengee, you left your lights on last night." I said, "Mr. Light, I didn't leave those lights on." He said, "Oh, yes, you did. I came in this morning. I had opened that door and turned those lights off." That happened 3 different times. So I got one of those sticky notes, and I wrote, "Turn off lights," and I stuck it right beside the light switch. The last time I was in that old office, which has been about 30 years ago, that note was still sticking there on the wall. Turn off the lights. And occasionally he would tell me again, "Your lights were on." So the thing about lights going on and off and on, I never saw that, but I was told that. So what I'm telling you is what I know. There were lots of things that were said over the years about shadows on the walls. There was a transformer hanging on a telephone pole that cast a shadow against the gym, and the cheerleaders came home one night and swore it was the Black Sisters, squealing and carrying on. But we solved that problem. It was just a shadow. But I did have a good time with the kids with some of this stuff. I'd take them down to the boiler room, and that was off limits to students. They could only go unless somebody was with them. And that's where we kept the coal furnaces. And of course, we weren't using coal at that time anymore. They'd been shut down. But we depended on heat being transferred from one building to another building. And as the thermostat inched up, the heat would come on. But for the life of me, we never could get our classrooms upstairs in the wintertime above 68 degrees, even with this new system of heat. But I like to go down there, and I'd have 4 or 5 students with me, and I said, "You know, they make noises down here. Be careful, you may hear some noise if they're a ghost in here," which I should not have done. And then I'd reach up on the wall and flip a switch. And when I flipped the switch on, the fan came on. The fan that pulled the heat from one building over to the big building. And when you did that, it created a vacuum, and the door would slam. And I'm telling you, that door slammed, those kids would jump straight up. So I quit doing that after the lady complained about a kid afraid to come to school. I said, I'm going to quit this foolishness. But the legend continued. I'll tell you about another call I got one night from the dispatcher. Mr. Ballengee, the alarm is going off at the middle school. Please meet the police officer at the front of the school. As soon as I got out of the car, you could hear it. The alarm was sounding. So I immediately got in the building and shut the alarm off. And the police officer was saying, "What is it?" I said, "Well, it's indicating it's in the computer room. And the computer room is down the walkway here about 100 yards. Let's go down and check." Went down there, nothing. Doors were locked. Everything was shipshape. All the computers were there. I said, must have been the Black Sisters. We blamed the Black Sisters for all stuff like this. So I went back home and I got in the bed, and about the time my head hit the pillow, the phone rang again. It was the dispatcher saying, "Mr. Ballengee, the alarm is going off at Christiansburg Middle School. Please meet the police officer at the front of the school." So he said again, "What's going on?" And I said, "I don't know, let's go see." Sure enough, the door was locked. Computers were all on. No problem. Well, it was funny the first time when I told him it was the Black Sisters. Well, it was funny this time, but it wasn't as funny as it was the first time. And I got back home, and no sooner had I gotten in bed, the phone rang again. It was the dispatcher. "Mr. Ballengee, I hate to call you, but you got an alarm going off at the middle school." So I jumped in the car and ran on up there, and I just went directly to the computer room after I got the school opened. And the police officer said, "Well, what do you think it is this time?" And I said, "Well, it's definitely not the Black Sisters. Let's open the classroom door and see what's going on." So we opened that door, and when we opened the door, the heat came on. And the heat came out of a register that was located just under an American flag. And when the heat came on and the air came up and the flag started waving, and the alarm went off. It was a motion sensor that was setting it off. So we solved that problem. It wasn't the Black Sisters by any means. But there were so many things that happened over the years that it just kind of blows my mind at times. How in the world did we ever live through all of that? I got a call one night from the dispatcher, and she said, "Mr. Ballengee, can you meet police officers at Christiansburg Middle School?" And I said, "Yes, I'll be right there." There was no alarm going off, but there were officers up on the building. And all of the doors were locked. The only door that was unlocked in that building was the kitchen door. And the kitchen door was secured so that you couldn't really get it open easily. And they said, "We think that there's somebody in the building." The owner of the business across the street has told us that lights are going on in one classroom and then going off. And then lights would come on in another classroom and then go off. And I said, "Well, I don't have any idea what that could be unless it's Black Sisters." But I said, "They haven't bothered this building. This is a building that's off limits to them. They just don't come in this building." But there were 3 or 4 police cars then with the officers wandering around, looking at the windows and checking to make sure that, everything was okay. And we concluded, based on what the officer investigated, that car lights, as they went down Radford Street, car lights would hit those windows and give the appearance of a light coming on. That's the only thing we could figure. But there was no vandalism, there was no black sisters. I was glad to get back in bed and get a night's sleep without getting called again, but I'd like to have $1 for every time the police has called me to come to the school.